Hi, I'm Richard Friedman, and welcome to my video cartoon for March 14th, 2026. Spring is around the corner, folks. Hang in there. Here is my cartoon for today, which is President Richard's President Trump sails on U.S. carrier up Strait of Hormuz for tanker gut building. So what I'm saying here is President Trump here has spoke. He said this about a few days ago. He said, here is what his exact words were when he was on President Trump to Brian Kilmeade on One Nation Sunday. He said this: these nations should go through the Strait of Hormuz and show some guts. There's nothing. These ships should go through the Strait of Hormuz and show some guts. There's nothing to be afraid of. They have no navy. We sunk all their ships. Okay, this is what President Trump said, I think, a few days ago. He said this. This is word for word. Okay. All right. Now, to go back to this here. So here we have President Trump. He's flanked by an F-35 fighter jet, and they're taking off to protect the president here. They're taking off from this. There's a plane taking off, and they're all following suit, and they're going to be circling over the president's carrier here. And here's President Trump with a loudspeaker saying what he's saying here. And I'm going to read that to you in a minute. Here is the F-35 stealth fighter jet above, flying over here to protect the president. And as the other ones are taking off to circle him and keep him protected. And here is a U.S. destroyer alongside the aircraft carrier also protecting President Trump. So he's doing this to show that he has, that if he can sail up the Strait of Hormuz today, then they have to have the guts too to do it. Sail up the strait and get those tankers out there. So here is what President Trump is saying in his loudspeaker. He's saying, "Here I am, Donald Trump, on a peaceful cruise through the wide open strait. Wouldn't that Islamic Revolutionary Guard love to get me? But they shot everything they had to shoot. Tankers, show some guts." So there he goes on his loudspeaker, telling tankers to show some guts as he sails through the strait. Of course, he is protected here by these fighter jets taking off here, and this fighter jet's already up there. And here is Iran, and here is the Strait of Hormuz, and here's a U.S. destroyer alongside the aircraft carrier, and he's sailing up the strait. There he goes. Okay, there it was. Okay, now the introduction. Okay, Strait of Hormuz, and amid Richard Trump said, given Iran's new supreme leader has declared the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed amid conflict with the U.S. Characterized the closing as a, quote, tool of pressure. And the oil attacks on the busiest oil shipping lane have sent the price of oil over $100 a barrel. That despite 32 nations releasing 400 million barrels of reliable sort of strategic global reserves. So 400 million barrels of strategic global reserves have been released, and that hasn't dropped the price at the pump. I just paid almost about 75 cents more per gallon just yesterday. You know, I was unbelievable. For half a tank, it seemed like I put in a whole tank, you know, for just a half. It wasn't like that bad, but it seemed that way. Okay, and reliable sources saying Iran has already laid at least a dozen mines in the strait. And okay, so what they're doing is this: they've been going out there with these large laying tankers, these big mine laying ships that Iran has been using to lay, and the United States, we sank them. So now they're using small ships that maybe you can't see on the radar to lay the mines. Instead of using the big ones, the big laying ships to lay these mines, they're using smaller ones, so that perhaps not seen on the radar, and they're going about their business. It could be, but we know that they switched from the large ships that were sunk, the mine laying ships that were sunk, to smaller ships using that way. Okay, and also 2 ships in the Persian Gulf were sunk by these, they call them drone boats now, that they have there's an unmanned boats, it's like an unmanned drone. These are unmanned boats loaded with explosives that's boom, crash into boats. Two tanker vessels were blown up in the Persian Gulf. I think it was near an Iranian port, not directly in the Hormuz Strait, but close to it. And there you have that. So here is President Trump. So those are 2 things I wanted to emphasize what's going on there. And here is President Trump, and here he's on his loudspeaker here. Here he goes, and he's saying, "Here I am, Donald Trump, on a peaceful cruise through the wide open strait. Wouldn't that Islamic Revolutionary Guard love to get me? But they shot everything they had to shoot. Tankers show some guts." So he's saying here, the Iranian, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, they got no more. They've shot everything they have. They got nothing to shoot at. Okay, they're very scared to get me, but they shot everything they had to shoot. There's nothing left to shoot. Meanwhile, you got these drone boats, and you got the mines going with these small little boats now. So that's not quite accurate. And a general said that the mines are not the greatest danger that Iran poses is not their mines. And now we see that coming true in that these motorized unmanned drone boats are already attacked 2 ships in the Persian Gulf. I repeated myself, but that's the point. He said this retired general, whatever, military official, said basically that the mines are secondary to the greatest threat that ships face in the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so he said, President Trump here saying, "Get some guts. Here I am, sailing up the strait." And there he goes, sailing up the strait. All right, folks. Now, here is this is something President Trump put up on Truth Social here. There it is. And he says here, "If Iran has put out any mines in the Hormuz Strait, and we have no reports of them doing so, we want them removed immediately. If for any reason mines were placed and they are not removed, forthwith, the military consequences to Iran will be at a level never seen before. If, on the other hand, they remove what may have been placed, it will be a giant step in the right direction. President Donald J. Trump." Okay, and this is word for word what President Trump put up on Truth Social. Okay, now, here we have Pete Hegseth, who calls himself the Secretary of War. It is still the Department of Defense, because Congress hasn't authorized the change. But Hegseth has put up the signs around the Pentagon saying Department of War, and he calls himself Secretary of War in a way. He does. He's Department of War. So we're going to give it to Pete. We'll give him the Secretary of War. Okay? So I'm going to say Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, on Friday, putting down concerns that Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz because of the war, which has driven up oil prices and gas prices in the U.S. Sure has. Like I said, I paid 75 cents more than what I should pay. You know, it felt like I put a whole tank of gas in the car, and I put only was a half a tank. That's the way it felt. It wasn't that bad, but it felt that way. With only a half a tank. Okay, would continue to be a problem for the U.S. economy. It's not going to be a problem for the U.S. economy. Not going to be a problem, and for long, maybe very very momentary situation. He says. And the world for much longer. Hegseth, well, that's President Trump. Hegseth at the Pentagon press briefing, okay? At a press briefing, he said this. Okay? Okay, so basically he's saying we are dealing with this. And the U.S. would continue to be a problem for the U.S. economy and the world. So here he goes here, and here he goes here. This is the way I represented him. He wasn't doing this at the time, but I drew him with a Tomahawk missile, an aircraft carrier. And there he goes, and he's saying here, Iran has been exercising, this is word for word what Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said. This is word for word right here. It said, Iran has been exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. We have been dealing with it and don't need to worry about it. So what he said when he says we, he says basically he means that President Donald J. Trump is handling it because he's calling the shots. So we is him and Donald Trump, President Trump, and President Trump is calling the shots, has been dealing with it, so we won't need to worry about it much longer. Okay? And he's saying this is like a sun shower, like a sun shower. You got a little rain and then the sun comes out. This is a sun shower, basically, a sun shower blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. A sun shower. Okay? There was that. Okay? Now, here is President Trump yesterday. This was March 13th. Yesterday, today's the 14th. Yesterday was Friday the 13th. Here's President Trump on when the Iran war will end. March 13th, 2026. So here's President Trump. Basically, here he is. And he's saying here, the war with Iran will end when I feel it in my bones. So here is President Trump. And here's President Trump's bones. Okay? So when he feels, I think he means this bone right here, maybe. This bone right there. Or some of these bones around here. So that's what he's saying when he feels in his bones. So the thing about it is when the war stopped, President Trump started because he had a feeling that Iran was going to attack very soon, and they were a week away from perfecting a complete atomic bomb to use, and they were going to attack within a week. He felt that, he had those feelings, so that was why he launched the war. So now it's only logical if the war started because of President Trump's feelings, that the war should end because of President Trump's feelings in his bones. So here's President Trump's bones, and when these bones start to feel that the war should end, when these bones here, all these bones start to feel that the war should end, the war that has President Trump with his USA, Make America Great Again cap on here. We can't leave him as a skeleton without the USA cap, Make America Great Again. And there it is. And when he feels it in these bones that the war should end, the war will end. Okay. All right. Okay, folks. I'm going to go back here and take President Trump through the Strait of Hormuz one more time. And here he goes. There he goes. Sailing through. Again, and he was saying here, basically, here, that they should, everything they had to shoot, they shot. Tankers should show some guts. Okay? So this is his message on the loudspeaker. Tankers show some guts. And there you go. There he went. All right, folks. I'm proud. I worked hard on this. Very hard. Many, many hours to get this. So I'm a little proud of it. Okay? All right. All right, folks. Thank you for watching my video. God bless you. Hang in there through all this. And I'll see you next time. Stay well, folks. God bless you. Take care. Bye.